Gen Z gets called the most anxious, most sensitive, most can't-handle real-life generation in history. But here's what almost nobody talks about. Gen Z is also the most self-aware generation ever studied. They can name their own trauma responses in casual conversation. They know what a trigger is, what gaslighting means, what burnout actually feels like at 19 years old. So today, we're breaking down what's really going on in the Gen Z mind, not the stereotypes, the actual psychology. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why this generation thinks so differently from everyone before it. Stick around till number 4. It's the one that explains why Gen Z jokes about being depressed more than any generation in history. And stay till the end, because the last section might explain something about you, no matter what generation you're actually from. Let's start with the most obvious difference. Gen Z grew up with therapy language as normal vocabulary. Terms like boundaries, attachment style, and emotional labor aren't clinical jargon to them. They're just how they talk. Psychologists call this psychological literacy, the ability to identify and name internal emotional states with precision. Older generations often had the feeling without the vocabulary. You just say, "I'm stressed." Gen Z will say, "I think I'm dealing with anticipatory anxiety because of an unresolved conflict with my mom." That level of self-labeling has a real upside. Better emotional communication, more willingness to seek therapy, less stigma around mental health struggles. But it has a real downside too. When you have a name for every uncomfortable feeling, it becomes very easy to over-identify with it. Naming a feeling can turn into becoming the feeling. "I feel anxious right now" quietly turns into "I am an anxious person." And that's a completely different, much heavier psychological weight to carry. Gen Z didn't invent anxiety. They just gave it a permanent seat at the table. Here's something most people miss. Gen Z is the first generation to come of age during back-to-back global crises. The 2008 financial collapse's aftermath, climate anxiety headlines, a global pandemic during their most formative social years, and now an economy where the classic work hard, buy a house path barely exists anymore. Psychologically, this creates something called chronic low-grade threat perception. It's not one big trauma. It's a constant background hum of instability that never fully resolves. And a nervous system exposed to ongoing low-level uncertainty behaves very differently than one that experiences a single contained crisis. This is a big part of why so much of Gen Z struggles with long-term planning. It's not laziness. When your brain has spent its entire development stage in an environment that keeps proving the future is unpredictable, committing to a 30-year mortgage or a lifelong career path doesn't feel responsible. It feels almost naive. That's why you see so much emphasis on living in the moment, side hustles instead of single careers, and renting experiences instead of buying permanence. It's not a values shift for its own sake. It's an adaptive response to genuine unpredictability. Now let's talk about something that defines Gen Z more than almost any other trait. An intense, almost allergic reaction to anything that feels fake, performative, or corporate. There's a psychological reason for this. Gen Z grew up watching curated, filtered perfection online from childhood, and then watching that perfection get exposed as fake, over and over, through Get Ready With Me videos, revealing the truth behind influencer lifestyles, brand scandals, and constant call-outs. That repeated exposure created something researchers call authenticity hypervigilance, a finely tuned radar for detecting manipulation, marketing spin, or emotional performance. It's why Gen Z responds so strongly to brands that seem real and rejects ones that feel scripted. It's why raw, unedited content often outperforms polished content with this audience. But this radar doesn't just point outward at brands, it points inward too. A lot of Gen Z individuals are constantly, almost exhaustingly, auditing their own authenticity, asking themselves, am I actually like this or performing it? That internal audit is exhausting, but it's also why this generation, when they do commit to something, tends to commit with real conviction. If you've ever caught yourself mid-sentence wondering, wait, am I even being real right now? Comment same below. I want to see how many of you do this constantly. Here's the one I promised you, the psychological twist most people don't expect. Gen Z jokes about depression, anxiety, and existential dread constantly. Memes about crying in the shower, jokes about the economy, casual comments like, LOL, I want to disappear. Older generations often read this as either concerning or performative. But psychologists studying gallows humor, dark comedy used as a coping mechanism, found something different. Joking about pain in a shared, communal way can actually be a healthy regulation strategy, not a warning sign. It's called distancing through humor. And it works by creating just enough psychological space from a painful feeling to make it tolerable, without fully suppressing it the way older generations were often taught to. Here's the twist. This isn't Gen Z being too online or desensitized. It's closer to how soldiers, ER doctors, and trauma nurses have used dark humor for decades to survive constant exposure to hard things. Gen Z, having grown up marinated in bad news through constant digital exposure, developed a similar coping style, collectively through memes instead of individually in silence. It's not that they don't feel the weight. It's that they figured out, faster than any generation before them, that laughing about the weight together is more survivable than carrying it alone in silence. That one hit different, right? Drop a skull in the comments if dark humor has genuinely helped you cope with something hard. Next, and this one is genuinely paradoxical. Gen Z is the most digitally connected generation in human history, and simultaneously reports the highest levels of loneliness of any generation ever surveyed. This is what researchers call the connection-intimacy gap. Gen Z has more communication channels than any generation before. DMs, group chats, comment sections, video calls, but a huge amount of that interaction is what psychologists call parasocial or shallow bandwidth connection. You can watch someone's entire day through their Instagram story and feel like you know them, without ever having a real two-way conversation. The brain doesn't fully distinguish between quantity of contact and quality of connection, but quality is what actually reduces loneliness. So you can have 800 followers, a group chat that never sleeps, and still feel completely unseen, because none of it hits the specific psychological need that only deep, reciprocal, undivided attention can satisfy. This is part of why in-person, phone-down hangouts have become almost a trend again for younger Gen Z. Flip phone summer, analog hobbies, board game cafes. It's not nostalgia, it's an instinctive correction. A generation quietly relearning what real connection actually feels like, because digital connection, no matter how constant, never fully closed that gap. Last psychological insight, and honestly, I think it's the one that will define this generation the most long-term. Gen Z is famous, sometimes criticized, for setting hard boundaries early, leaving jobs that harm their mental health, going low contact with toxic family members, refusing hustle culture, prioritizing rest without guilt. Older generations often read this as entitlement, but psychologically, it's closer to something else. Earned self-protection, built from watching previous generations burn out, stay in harmful situations for stability, and normalize suffering as the price of responsibility. Gen Z watched that trade-off happen to the people around them, and largely decided it wasn't worth it. That's not weakness. Setting a boundary requires a level of self-worth and internal validation that's actually psychologically demanding to maintain, especially against pressure from older authority figures who see it as disrespect. Whether you agree with how they do it or not, the underlying psychological shift is real. Gen Z, more than any generation before them, treats their own mental and emotional capacity as something worth protecting before it breaks, instead of after. So, Gen Z isn't too sensitive or too online. They're a generation that grew up self-aware in a way no one before them had the vocabulary for, adapting to real instability, allergic to anything fake, coping through shared dark humor, quietly lonely despite constant connection, and setting boundaries earlier than anyone thought they were allowed to. And if you made it this far in the video, whether you're Gen Z yourself or watching from a completely different generation, that tells me something about you too. You're someone who actually wants to understand people instead of just judging them from the outside. You sat through 9 minutes of nuance instead of skipping to the comments to argue. That's exactly the kind of mind this channel is built for. Every week I break down the hidden psychology behind everyday things, generations, habits, relationships, the way people think without even realizing it. If that's your kind of content, hit subscribe now, because next week's video digs into something even more surprising. And honestly, I think it might explain you even better than this one did. See you in the next one.